Hello and welcome to today's webinar. We'll be talking about enterprise-grade disaster recovery without breaking the bank. My name is David Davis, and I'll be the moderator for today's event. Today's event is put on by Actual Tech Media, and today's sponsor is CloudEndure. So thanks everyone for taking time out of your schedule to join us for today's event. We have a lot of great things to talk about related specifically to disaster recovery. Before we do that, there's a few housekeeping things that I want to bring to your attention. First off, if you have questions during the webinar, you should use the GoToWebinar question box there to enter your question. We want this to be a highly educational event, and I mean the topic of cloud is is still evolving. It's still relatively new for most everyone out there. So ask away, ask all the questions you want. I have a lot of cloud computing knowledge. I'll do my best to answer, and we have an expert on the event today, Mr. Gonenstein from CloudEndure as well, to help answer those cloud questions, especially related to disaster recovery. Now, at the end of the event, we'll be having a Q&A session, so we might save up some of those questions to the end of the event. Now, in just a moment, I'll be asking you a poll question, and then Gonen has one later for you in his presentation as well to get your feedback, your thoughts about cloud computing, especially related to disaster recovery. You can also download the slides from this event there in the handout section of the GoToWebinar control panel if you want to download those for later reading or share those with a friend or coworker. Now, one lucky attendee today will win a $300 Amazon gift card, and we'll be randomly selecting that person from the number of attendees at the end of the event. All right, so with that, we've got a lot to cover. Let's go ahead and get started by introducing you to today's speakers. As I said, my name is David Davis. I'm a partner at Actual Tech Media, a 7-time VMware vExpert, author of numerous video training courses available at pluralsight.com, mostly around virtualization and cloud computing. Prior to that, I was an IT manager where I implemented VMware vSphere in the data center. We virtualized everything, had a great success with that, and then we started looking for disaster recovery, colo locations, and I can tell you it was not an easy process. So I might share some of those antidotes here later in the presentation. But if that's you right now, if you're looking for disaster recovery solutions, I can tell you that I have been there before, and I know it's not always an easy process. You can find my blogs over at actualtech.io, and you can find me on Twitter as David M. Davis. Now, I'm proud to be joined by Mr. Gonenstein. He's the Vice President of Business Development at CloudEndure. Gonen, do you want to say a few words about yourself?
Sure. Thanks, everyone, for joining. This is Gonenstein here. As David said, I'm the VP of Business Development at CloudEndure. I'm responsible for our different strategic partnerships with both the cloud providers in this ecosystem as well as many of our mutual consulting partners. I'm also very deeply involved with a lot of our strategic clients, and I come from a very technical background. I've been in the business for over 15 years in technologies around security, infrastructure, cloud storage, and new cloud infrastructure in general.
Awesome, awesome. Well, thanks for being on the event today. I look forward to your presentation. I've seen it. It's got a lot of good stuff in it. So before we do that, I want to pop up a quick poll question here for the audience. Let me launch that. You should see that on your screen now. It says, what are your plans for using the public cloud for disaster recovery? So are you looking for solutions now, within the next 3 to 6 months, 6 to 12, or is it, a year out before you think you might use the public cloud for disaster recovery? Or maybe you don't have any specific plans, just learning about disaster recovery and cloud solutions on the event today. Thanks for taking time to answer that. Let's see, we've got the majority of the audience has answered. Let me go ahead and share those results with you. There, you can see, within the next year, we can say, 45% of the audience out there has some sort of plans for using public cloud for some kind of disaster recovery. So I think, that's expected from my perspective at least, and very encouraging to see that so many companies, are excited about what the public cloud has to offer related to DR. All right, so let's get on with today's topic. So here's what we're going to be covering. We'll kick it off by talking about a cost comparison of 3 different DR strategies. Gonan is going to present those. We'll have a comprehensive breakdown of disaster recovery infrastructure costs. We'll talk about the benefits of cloud-based disaster recovery, and as well as use cases from enterprises who've reduced IT expenditures with cloud DR. And before we cover those, I do want to kind of give a high-level kind of state of cloud and the benefits of cloud DR. So we at Actual Tech Media, we've done a number of different studies and surveys of our audience, asking them about data protection, cloud solutions, disaster recovery, and so forth. And one of the things that came back was that, of course, we all know that disaster recovery is a key business need. I mean, our data is the most important asset our company has, so it's critical that we, do everything we can to protect that. But in a recent survey we did, almost half of the respondents said they didn't have a DR solution in place that can protect their company from an unexpected disaster. And that's pretty scary to think of. Roughly, if we said to say, let's make an assumption, roughly half the businesses we work with don't have a DR solution in place. That's pretty scary. So hopefully cloud and cloud DR specifically is going to make that a lot easier and a lot more affordable for these types of companies. Because according to IDC, and there's a lot of statistics out there on the internet, but one of them that I found from IDC is that the cost of an outage averages $20,000 per hour. And actually, that seems really low. That may be kind of broad across all different sizes of businesses because, I mean, if you look at very large enterprises, just one tier 1 application being down, in many cases can cost them, millions of dollars a minute even in some cases. So today's disaster recovery challenges are, and I've been there before. Like I said, IT organizations, we're busy. We're way too busy. We don't have a lot of time, and disaster recovery, in many cases, ends up at the bottom, of the to-do list. It's always something we hope we'll never need, and it's something that it just doesn't seem to be that high priority. And that's also because it's expensive and it's complicated. In many cases, it's painful. At many companies, if they have a DR solution in place, it's built on 5 to 10-year-old, technology and concepts. Basically, taking the existing data center, buying all new hardware that replicates it, and running it somewhere else. Now, infrastructure and applications are changing, so much faster than the DR plan. We're adding new VMs, we're adding containers, we're adding new applications. We're making changes far faster than a manual, in many cases, paper-based instruction manual, can keep up with, much less time to, test whatever DR plan, that we have. So it's our job to, maximize whatever little budget we have for disaster recovery and make the most of it. We want to do more with less. As much as I hate that phrase, it's especially true when it comes to disaster recovery. So IT organizations, they need a solution that makes DR easy. So what is cloud-based DR? Just to make sure we're all on the same page here, cloud-based DR is critical data that's replicated off-site to some sort of secure public cloud. And it's done, a lot of different ways. And Gonan's going to talk about multiple approaches, multiple different ways, to tackle that problem. In many cases, it's done with virtual machines. And then if there is a disaster, those virtual machines and their applications, they can be powered up, almost instantaneously in this public cloud or private cloud, however it's done. So when it comes to costs, you're paying for, the storage of your data in many cases. You might pay for powering on virtual machines for testing and recovery, but most importantly, compared to traditional DR, you don't pay for a secondary data center or a co-location at a secondary data center. You don't have to pay to buy servers and storage and networking at that facility and then manage and maintain everything that's at that redundant site. So if you compare the costs, traditional DR, you have racks and UPS and power, internet, secondary internet connections, servers, storage, In many cases, you have to buy redundant operating systems and application licenses and failover tools, and then there's maintenance contracts for all of that, and then it's just sitting there. You're paying the electric bill and power and cooling, and then you have to keep it upgraded and secure. With cloud-based DR, you just need some way to get your data to the cloud, some sort of replication solution. You have to store that data. You have to test that DR solution that's in the cloud, and then if you need it, then you have to pay for it to recover, right? So with traditional DR, there's a lot of capital expenditure involved, and with cloud-based options, it's all operational expenditure, or that's typically how these two models break down. And from a business perspective, the businesses, especially financial people, love the OpEx model because you pay for it when you need it, or you pay for it as you scale it up, versus capital expenditure. As we know, IT people, it's always very painful. You walk in with your hat in your hand and an expenditure request for $100,000 or whatever it might be, and you kind of feel like you have to beg to get the money that you need to do something like DR. And like we said, DR is always at the bottom of the priority list. So if you try to compare the cost between these two, just to do some comparisons, you need to know, of course, what you have. You need to know your hosts, your VMs, how much data, and how much that data is changing. And then you also need to know what the business requires. Does the business need all the applications up in under 5 minutes or whatever it might be, with no more than 5 minutes of data loss? Or what are the business requirements? What's the recovery point objective and the recovery time objective? And in many cases, these are tough, to kind of figure out. But thankfully, I know Gonen's on the event today. I think that he has, or I feel confident he has, some solutions to help us out with this. So Gonen, I'm going to go ahead and change presenter over to you. And you can share your screen, because I'm very interested, and I know the audience is interested to hear what what CloudEndure can do to help make their lives easier when it comes to disaster recovery.
Perfect. Sounds good. Thank you, David. And just to make sure, can you see my screen?
I do, yes.
Okay, sounds good. So thank you very much for the background. It's great. I think it gives good context to the audience. So what I want to talk about today is what we've researched in the market. We run periodic surveys to understand what the big issues are, what customers are looking for, the different pain points, and build solutions that can help them very effectively. And in periodic surveys that we run around the disaster recovery space on an annual basis, we find interesting things, a lot of interesting things, but the top 3 reasons that customers are experiencing challenges with disaster recovery, they all want it. Everyone wants to be able to be resilient and to ensure business continuity, but we run into common issues of insufficient IT resources, whether it be human resources, IT resources, hardware, budget limitations. That's a very common one because disaster recovery historically has been pretty expensive, primarily because of the fact that it required duplicating everything that you have to recover properly, and also lack of in-house expertise. Disaster recovery and maintaining business continuity is not something easy. There's a lot of know-how, a lot of skill sets required, and that's another big challenge. And the problem is that in today's world, when businesses are becoming more and more serving customers around the clock, it's not nice to have anymore. For some small businesses maybe, but for larger businesses, and not as large as Delta Airlines. If you ask them $150 million of loss during an outage, that's a pretty big deal. But even with smaller businesses, it's becoming very important because businesses are running around the clock. And they want to ensure that they're resilient to different issues, outages, hacker attacks, hardware failures, floods, hurricanes, fires. They want to stay competitive. They don't want a competitor to say, your business is not resilient, please come and work with us. If you have regulatory compliances that you need to comply with, whether it's for maintaining the security of your customers, maintaining uptime for your customers, that's another big issue. And regardless, you just want to keep your customers happy and ensure that your reputation isn't damaged. So what's the problem? I mean, if this was easy, then we would all have disaster recovery solutions in place. But again, it's not easy. It's pretty expensive, and typically customers need help. They want to know what they need to do. And historically, there have been different approaches to enable disaster recovery, to have business continuity in place. And we're going to talk about some of those strategies today, the primary strategies that we run across, the historical ones, the on-premise and DRaaS, and also the new cloud-based approaches. And we're going to talk about the advantages and disadvantages of either approach. So the first one, the most traditional one, is on-premise disaster recovery, or also known as do-it-yourself. This has been something that typically only the largest enterprises were able to do. Only the largest enterprises had the budget, the money to put it in place, because it required, again, duplicate infrastructure, special technologies and licenses to replicate the data. The duplicate infrastructure included compute, expensive storage, high-performance storage, and in many cases they weren't even that good in terms of achieving business objectives, but at least you had the ability to at some point recover. And then over the years came along enterprise-grade solutions for on-premise that replicate everything in real time, and that was great. Very expensive, but it worked just fine. Later on came other types of solutions, disaster recovery as a service providers. These are vendors that specialize in providing disaster recovery services, and they own their own infrastructure. So they own their own data centers, specifically designed to provide disaster recovery solutions. And that was typically a cheaper, or more cost-effective, affordable approach than doing it yourself, because there were better economies of scale and also better skill sets. It was you were working with someone that can help you set things up and also help you go through a recovery scenario during a disaster. And recently, in recent years, cloud, it's not a secret that cloud had become pretty common. Everyone wants to use cloud. In most cases, it's a lot cheaper due to tremendous economies of scale. It's very easy to use. And then came along technologies, disaster recovery technologies, that can leverage cloud. There are many different technologies that can leverage disaster recovery, or leverage cloud for disaster recovery. So we're going to talk about the different advantages and disadvantages of these types of approaches. So let's talk about the first one, on-prem disaster recovery, or do-it-yourself disaster recovery. As I mentioned before, this is the way that enterprises typically handle this, and this required duplicate infrastructure on-premise, so quite expensive, duplicate compute storage, tremendous capital expenses, and also operating expenses in operating that hardware. Licenses, in many cases, is even a worse issue than duplicate infrastructure, because licenses for secondary applications running in the DR site could generate quite a big bill. Solutions from SQL servers, Oracle databases, SAP workloads. If you're looking to maintain these secondary licenses active and ready to go in the target facility, it can become quite expensive. And then you also need to have the IT staff to manage everything, to set things up, to ensure that things continue to work, to monitor everything, and to handle a situation during a disaster. So it works just fine if you're using the right solutions, but most organizations could simply not afford having the solution in place, because it seemed like an insurance policy that's just too expensive and doesn't justify what it's providing. Disaster recovery as a service solutions work in a similar fashion, where these DRaaS, disaster recovery as a service DRaaS providers, are hosting their own infrastructure in benefit of customers. And it is more cost effective because they have the luxury of under provisioning. They anticipate that not all their customers are going to experience a disaster at the same time, so they can under provision. Now, in a worst case scenario, things can get pretty bad, because if a lot of their customers are experiencing outages and they're activating DR at the same time, they're under provisioned and things will fail. Just like trying to board an overbooked flight, it's not going to work. But for the most part, it's a good service for a lot of many organizations, but it's still very expensive, because it still requires duplicate or almost duplicate compute, almost duplicate storage, definitely duplicate licenses, because you still have to pay for any licenses for applications that are ready to go in the case of a disaster. But you do get assistance from the DRaaS provider in terms of monitoring, configuration, setup. So that's something that the DRaaS providers will provide. The costs can differ. You can have low-end DRaaS providers that will charge reasonable amounts, and then you have the other ones that are quite expensive. And then comes cloud-based disaster recovery. Cloud and disaster recovery, the way that we envision this, and we're not alone, it's almost like a perfect marriage between two things that should have gone together for a very long time. Because disaster recovery is something that you really shouldn't have to pay through your nose all the time throughout every given day or hour of the year unless disaster actually strikes. And it goes very well with the whole concept of cloud, where you're only going to pay for what you use, pay as you go, pay for what you use. And so the DR infrastructure that's required, if you do it right, there are many ways to use cloud for disaster recovery. If you can also do it in a way that's very similar to on-premise, where you provision resources in a duplicate fashion, but it kind of defeats the purpose. If you do it right, there is no need to provision duplicate infrastructure. There is a way to provision extremely lightweight compute, which is where most of the charges come from, and also much lighter, less expensive storage that is being used to keep the data in sync. Software licenses, again, if you do it right, are not going to be required because the luxury in the cloud is that you really don't have to run things unless you really need them, unless you really need to use them right now for test or for actual disaster recovery purposes. So the reduction in software licenses can become 100%. And then management and monitoring becomes easier when you're using cloud because cloud is accessible from anywhere. As long as you have permissions and you can authenticate properly, you can authenticate against the disaster recovery service component where you can manage the environment quite easily. You can test, you can look at your replication process, progress, and you can also connect to your cloud providers console, whether it be clouds like Amazon or Microsoft or Google or even your private clouds. You can access those quite easily as opposed to how this was done traditionally. And if we take a closer look at the costs, you can see that it can become very dramatic. With a small enterprise, relatively small enterprise that is protecting only 250 servers, based on different surveys, not from CloudEndure, just general surveys in the market, you can see that having an on-premise do-it-yourself disaster recovery solution implemented can generate quite a bit of disaster recovery hardware costs for compute, storage, networking, and also the monitoring components and the licensing components and the services components, which can become quite dramatic. For 250 servers with a do-it-yourself manner, in a do-it-yourself manner, the costs can easily get up to over $3 million. If you're going with a DRaaS approach, going with a DRaaS provider, the cost reduction can already become quite significant, about 58%, going down to about $1.3 million. And doing it using a cloud-based solution, if you do it right, if you don't do it just in a naive way of duplicating everything, but actually use cloud the way the cloud was supposed to be used, the cost reduction versus a DRaaS provider can be extremely dramatic. 82% is the average that we're seeing. And the larger organization the organization is, the larger that TCO reduction becomes. So 750 servers in a do-it-yourself duplicate infrastructure fashion, over $11 million, DRaaS over $4.5 million, and only $650K all-inclusive licenses and infrastructure and services for a proper way of using cloud for disaster recovery. And we're going to be very happy later on to dive into the details of these numbers for anyone who may be interested. So, is a cheaper option the better one, right? As always, the answer is going to be it depends. You know, there's always a cheaper way of doing things, but in many cases it's going to be counterproductive. Technology is a very big part of this equation. You know, are you using the right technology for cloud-based DR? There are naive ways of replicating data. You can replicate files, set up systems on the target side, replicate files in some shape or form. That will mean that you're going to have to pay for the infrastructure. Again, just like an on-premise deployment, you're going to have to pay for the target infrastructure, and you're going to run into data consistency issues and locking issues and permissioning issues. There are other ways of using database replication, which again requires you to set up databases as a target DR side database, replicate the data, find a way to somehow replicate the rest of the system. find how long or how frequent the replication is going to be conducted, which will definitely impact your recovery point objectives. If the replication isn't done in a frequent enough fashion, then your data loss during a disaster, or RPO, point objective, is going to be very high. And then there's also the RTO considerations. How fast do you want to be up and running in a case of a disaster? Is a downtime of 4 hours or 1 day good enough for you, or are you looking to be up and running and resilient within minutes? So the right DR technology that leverages cloud should really allow you to maintain the same enterprise-grade level of resilience that you had with enterprise-grade on-premise DR solutions, but also leverage the cloud properly and benefit with dramatic cost reductions due to cloud. There are other benefits for using cloud-based disaster recovery other than the usual ones that I've just mentioned, but easy testability. Leveraging cloud for DR makes things a lot easier for you when you want to periodically test that your disaster recovery environment is actually functioning as expected. Because it's one thing to test to set up a disaster recovery implementation, but then when disaster strikes, if you really can't sleep well at night knowing that everything can be up and running pretty quickly, it's not really worth anything. So it's very important to be able to test easily and frequently that your disaster recovery implementation is working fine, and cloud allows you to do that. Self-service, that's also very important. You don't want to be in a position where you have to make a phone call every time you want to test things out or provide long notices before you can come into a site, like a DRaaS site, and shut down your source environment and then get the assistance of someone else to help you spin up your servers. With cloud, you can just do it yourself. You can connect to a console, you can test your machines very quickly, make sure that everything's behaving as expected, and then you can sleep good at night knowing that this is exactly how it's going to behave during a real disaster. And the other thing is flexibility between infrastructures. When you're using a DRaaS provider or any target for DR, you definitely want to have options. You don't want to be locked in. So if one morning you wake up and you want to use a different cloud for your disaster recovery site or go back to on-premise, you need a mechanism to easily be able to do that. That's the other thing. Moving between clouds with the right technology becomes pretty simple. And if you look at this from a high level, this is what we've seen with our clients that have used historically on-premise deployments and then switched to DRaaS deployments or went directly to cloud. All solutions, if they're done right, can provide enterprise-grade capabilities, but the total cost of ownership is a lot higher in on-premise, less expensive with DRaaS, and much, much less expensive with cloud-based. And then there are the other things that we talked about, how easy it is to manage, how easy it is to test, how easy it is to scale. Obviously, if you have your own disaster recovery implementation on-premise, and now you're growing your production environment by, let's say, another 100 machines, you need to order another 100 machines and set up that hardware for the DR site. With DRaaS providers, you have the option of doing that more easily, but you still have to give them a heads up, and that's going to take some time for them to provision the machines for you. With cloud, that really does not matter. You want more machines, no big deal. You just install the replication agent on the machine that you want to protect, and the cloud provider will not run out of resources. That's the economies of scale that cloud providers can benefit clients. And then self-service, flexibility between infrastructure that we talked about, and the fact that it's all software defined. It's really, really easy to manage. So, questions that, actually, I think, David, we may want to run the poll at this point and then get to this slide.
Absolutely, yeah. Let me bring up that poll right now. There we go. What are your top business continuity challenges? Too expensive? Resources are being consumed, too many resources? Or is it hard to meet your recovery objectives? We're getting a lot of votes in here. Let's see what the winner is. I guess there can be multiple winners actually in this poll. It's a multi-select question. All right, looks like most of the audience has voted. I'm going to go ahead and share the results out. What do you think, Gonan?
Yeah, this definitely falls in line with what we're seeing in the ecosystem. So I think yeah, it definitely speaks to the benefits of using cloud for DR to reduce the costs and to also reduce the resources that are being consumed.
Absolutely. Yeah, I totally agree.
Excellent. Great. Thanks, everyone. Thanks for the answers to the poll. The questions that we get typically from our customers, in addition to what was just asked, is a very common one is how much data will the customer lose during a disaster, or in other words, the RPO, recovery point objective. So again, the answer is it depends on what you're using, right? If you're using naive approaches of replicating files or snapshots or database replication, that it really depends. But when you use technology to replicate data continuously, which is something that we can help with, then your RPO becomes very low, near zero, measured in seconds or milliseconds. Another important question, obviously, that ties in a way to RPOs is the RTO question, the recovery time objective question. How long is it going to take the servers that you're protecting to be up and running? So again, depending on how you do it, it can take anywhere between days or hours, and it can also take minutes to be up and running. Another question has to do with multiple types of infrastructures. So as you know, as everyone knows, infrastructure can be very different. You can have physical machines, you can have virtual machines, you can have cloud-based machines. Maybe you're already running in the cloud, you're running some primary applications in the cloud, but it still doesn't mean that they're protected from disaster. So can you protect them? Depending on the technology, the answer could be anywhere from only virtual or everything, hybrid, doesn't matter. And then also what applications can be supported, whether you can only replicate or protect specific types of databases, specific types of file servers, web servers. So again, if you do it right, you can replicate anything, you can protect anything. That's also something that our technology allows you to do, and I'll explain that in a little more detail. Is it possible to use a cloud for disaster recovery without moving the primary workload to the cloud? Absolutely. Security, very common question. Is the data going to be encrypted, in transit, at rest? So for compliance reasons or just security IP reasons, can you easily fail back? That's in many cases the million-dollar question, because it's relatively easier to spin things up in the cloud. But what happens when disaster is over and you want to go back? How easy is that going to be to return to your original primary site? So those are the typical questions that come up. And with that, let's talk a little bit about what makes CloudEndure pretty unique in this regard, all those different topics that we just reviewed. The things that our customers find the most interesting with CloudEndure is that we really make things agnostic. We are able to support any kind of platform, physical machines, virtual machines, cloud-based machines, any applications. This has to do with the fact that we are replicating at the lowest level possible. We're replicating at the block level, which means that we can really support anything, anything and everything. We replicate all the time, which means that the data replication frequency is continuous. We're not periodically taking a look at the data and finding changes and replicating them. We're continuously monitoring for any changes, and we capture them in real time, down to the millisecond, and then we replicate them to the target location of your choice. And it's all being done in an automated fashion, so there's nothing that you need to do manually to provision systems in the cloud, to spin things up systems in the cloud during the case of a disaster. Everything is done automatically via cloud-based APIs, which CloudEndure manages on your behalf. So that's from a high level what CloudEndure can do for you for disaster recovery. One of our clients, Click Software, they had a challenge. They had a solution that was running many servers that were replicating using a traditional approach, and their RPOs, the recovery point objectives, were 24 hours, which was not good enough, and they wanted to reduce it. They didn't know how aggressively it can be reduced, but they were looking around the market. They were asking different types of cloud providers and systems integrators which technologies they should look at and possibly leverage, and one of their integrators recommended CloudEndure, and their target cloud was Amazon, AWS. After lengthy evaluations and making sure that everything can be supported properly, they implemented CloudEndure's continuous replication technology for disaster recovery. There was no system disruption, so no reboot required, no performance impact, and they were able to get down to RPOs, recovery point objectives, of seconds, with RTOs of minutes, being able to recover with mere minutes from the time of the disaster. Not to mention the fact that their TCO was dramatically reduced because of how cloud is leveraged for DR, and they're now able to also conduct non-disruptive drills whenever they want. Every few minutes if they want. From our perspective, it doesn't matter. They can conduct these drills, and as I've said before, sleep well at night, knowing that they know exactly what to expect for the system to come up during an actual disaster when it strikes. So that's a little story from our customer Click Software. So if we summarize the different things that we talked about, the first and foremost, the main reason that customers are evaluating CloudEndure for disaster recovery purposes is either to use disaster recovery in the first place. Maybe some of them didn't have disaster recovery because it was too expensive, and now it's finally within reach. That's one very common use case. In other use cases, in other scenarios, customers that are already using disaster recovery technologies and they start leveraging CloudEndure plus a cloud provider, like an Amazon or a Google or an Azure, their cost reduction is typically in the range of 85%, depending on a lot of different things, infrastructure costs that they have today, licensing costs. If they have tremendous licensing costs for third-party applications, the cost reduction can be even more dramatic, much more dramatic than 85%. One really important thing is whether you can do it in a non-disruptive fashion. So our technology, the way that it works is that we replicate in real time in memory. We capture any changes when they happen in memory. We don't take snapshots. We don't write anything to the disk, which means eventually that impact on performance is going to be negligible, completely negligible on the source application. We can replicate from anywhere to anywhere, so really there's no restriction whether it's physical, virtual, cloud. You can see here some of the common public cloud providers or even private clouds like OpenStack that we can support when we replicate the data. Oops, sorry. And then minimal RPOs and RTOs. So being able to protect the systems and cause as little data loss as possible in the case of a disaster, and also be able to spin up the system as quickly as possible when a disaster strikes. Security. So make sure that data is always encrypted, encrypted at rest, encrypted in transit. That's something that we take care of. We work with enterprises commonly, so we know what the big no-nos are, like always encrypt data, make sure you always encrypt data, nothing should ever remain unencrypted. The data transmission should always be in the customer's control. Ensure that the data is transmitted directly from the customer's source server to the target location of their choice without going through any third-party entity, such as CloudEndure. So nothing ever goes through our servers. And we follow the standards, ISO 27001 compliancy and other compliances as well. And from an independence and control perspective, being able to test whenever you want, very quickly, very easily is important, and also being able to move to any infrastructure easily. So if you're unhappy with a certain cloud provider, no big deal. You can always move to a different cloud provider with CloudEndure. And if you're unhappy in the cloud altogether and you want to bring everything back to on-premise, no big deal as well. We can reverse the replication direction and bring back the systems to the on-premise environment. We're not going to have enough time to go through a demo today. Happy to conduct offline demo sessions to whoever is interested, but just to kind of give you an idea of how the technology looks like, we've prepared a few screenshots of what the technology shows you when you, what the console shows you when you log in to the disaster recovery console. First, when you log in, you'll see a list of the machines that you're currently replicating. So in this case, just one machine on this list, which is showing that it's replicating everything in a continuous data protection fashion. So this means that the initial sync of this machine has been completed at some point in the past, and it's replicating everything in real time. You can see a lag column that shows you what your RPO is, your recovery point objective. In this case, it's none, because it's really replicating in real time. Should there be some network disconnection or network saturation or any kind of issue, you can see the lag increasing, and that will be your RPO, your recovery point objective. Here under the next screen, Info and Settings, this is where it shows you how you can customize the machine's properties when it comes up in the cloud, right? Because when we replicate the data to the cloud, it's being replicated to a very lightweight, dormant staging area that keeps the data in sync, and only in the case of a disaster, only then do we provision the systems in real time very, very quickly. Until then, you're paying that based on that 85% plus TCO reduction. And only in the case of a disaster, we spin things up. On this screen, you can define how and where the systems will be spun up during the case of a disaster or a DR test. So what instance types are going to be used, what subnets, networks are going to be used, firewall rules, and so on. And finally, we have a dashboard, a convenient dashboard that shows you the health of your disaster recovery implementation. So how many machines have completed their initial sync and are ready to go, how many machines are currently going through the initial sync process, if anything requires attention. If you have networking issues or performance issues, we can show you what's going on. And if the replication is just stuck for whatever reason, we can show you that as well. So that's how the product works. And again, happy to coordinate offline sessions with whoever wants to see the product in action. And with that, some of our customers and partners, as you can see here, there are multiple verticals that are interested in disaster recovery. We haven't seen specific verticals that are interested in this more than others. It's been anywhere from technology companies, publishing companies, manufacturing, retail, financial, banking. So a lot of customer industries that are that see disaster recovery as really important. Business continuity is really important. There are a lot of partners in the ecosystem, consulting partners, SI partners that provide these types of services to their clients. And a lot of them, you can see here, are leveraging CloudEndure's technology to maintain that ongoing replication. And from a cloud provider platform, we work with all the common ones. You can see some of them on the top right-hand side, the public ones, Google and Amazon's of the world and the Azures of the world, but we also support private cloud implementations. And with that, let me stop here and ask if anyone has any questions. You want to type in the chat. And thank you for inviting me. And David, I'll hand it back to you.
Excellent. Yeah, thanks, Gunnar. Very cool presentation. I see a lot of benefits in what CloudDR can do for so many companies. I mean, I wish I had it when I was an IT manager searching for DR solutions. So, there are questions coming in from the audience, but I encourage as many questions as we can get. The first one here that I have for you is they're asking, can we use CloudEndure to replicate Oracle databases to AWS DR EC2 instances and keep it in sync instead of using DataGuard, they said?
Yes, good question. So the answer is yes, absolutely. It's actually one of the very, very common use cases for us because using Oracle DataGuard for replication means that you're paying a lot of money on three different fronts. You're paying for the duplicate infrastructure, compute storage to run the database on the target site. You need to pay for, so that means the EC2 instances and the storage. You need to pay for the Oracle license itself for the slave database. And you also need to pay for DataGuard. And all those are really expensive. With CloudEndure, we have an agent technology that would run on the source Oracle machine and would simply replicate the data in real time. We don't really know and we don't care that it's an Oracle database because we are replicating at the block level. And we are replicating that to a dormant staging area that keeps everything in sync in a very low-cost fashion. And we're only going to provision the Oracle database on the target site whenever the disaster strikes.
Very nice, very nice. So a lot of potential saving there for efficiency as well as cost, it sounds like to me.
Yeah.
Another question here is about, is it possible to have B2B WAN circuits in a cloud DR site? You think they're talking about something like Direct Connect?
Maybe. If they're referring to something else, then I would be happy to dive into further detail. But absolutely, most of our enterprise clients are using private connections to replicate the data. It's not a must-have. We can also have the data replicated over the public internet if desired. We encrypt the data in transit anyway. But most of our enterprise clients are using either VPN routes for private connectivity or Direct Connect, or with the other cloud providers, it could be Interconnect or Express Route to replicate the data in a private fashion, primarily for increasing speed of the initial sync, as well as reducing costs instead of sending everything over the public internet.
Right, right. Yeah, I know different cloud providers call those circuits something different. Like you said, I think Amazon is Direct Connect, and but everyone has a different name for it. Essentially, a private WAN circuit from the customer to the public cloud provider's
Yeah.
data center. Yeah.
Yep, that's exactly right.
Okay, and I guess here's kind of a broad question for you. How do you compare yourself to the competition? What sets you apart? What makes CloudEndure better?
Yeah, so a couple of things. First off would be the efficient use of cloud. So again, when you look at the TCO, there is the licensing consideration, there is the infrastructure consideration, and then there's the human resources required to support that properly. With CloudEndure, we have tremendous efficiencies that reduce the TCO, some of which I've talked about today. I can also go into further detail, but cost reduction from a TCO perspective is one of the major reasons. The other major reason is the RPOs and the RTOs that we can achieve, near zero RPOs and near zero RTOs, seconds and seconds or milliseconds of RPOs and minutes of RTOs. That's pretty dramatic. So it's almost like getting the performance of a hot standby, a high availability site, with the cost reduction of a very cold standby. So that's the other reason. And then also the fact that we don't disrupt anything. We don't require any kind of reboots when the system begins working. We don't impact performance in any noticeable way. Those are the top reasons that that we are being selected. Oh, and actually one other thing that we for some reason fail to mention commonly, but we have a 100% success rate for replicating systems, and it stems from the fact that we have this block level replication technology that replicates everything, so there's nothing we can miss, there's nothing we can leave behind, it's always going to work, and it's going to come up in a consistent fashion. And we have our own system conversion technology that has, again, a 100% success rate of converting systems from the source infrastructure to the target one, like VMware to Amazon, Google, Azure, and vice versa.
Very nice, very nice. A lot more questions coming in, so I'll just keep them rolling here. Why is there such a big cost differentiator between doing things on-prem versus the cloud? I think I kind of covered that in that chart I had where I detailed out all the, everything that's involved in the CapEx versus the OpEx. But what's your take, Conan?
Yeah, so in a nutshell, it's the fact that in on-premise implementation, you really need to provision duplicate infrastructure, and that's expensive. And in the cloud, you don't. You only need to pay for what you use when you need it, and that is the reason for the dramatic cost reduction.
Great point. Great point. Yeah. Someone else asked, does it work with Exadata? Are you familiar with that?
Yeah, it does. It does. So again, no issue from our perspective. We can replicate any database, including Exadata, transparently because we replicated the block level. So you would simply install the agent on the machine running the Exadata, like an Oracle Linux, whether it's a physical box or a virtual box, and we would replicate everything at the block level and bring up the system, including the Exadata database on the target side, without any issues. Just
Got it.
like we would do any other application or database.
Okay. What about physical servers? Is it possible to replicate those into the cloud?
Yes, with CloudEndure it is. One of the main differentiators of our solution is the fact that we replicate from the OS itself. So unlike storage-based replication solutions that require SAN level access or hypervisor-based replication solutions that require hypervisor access to the VMware or Hyper-V hypervisor, CloudEndure replicates those blocks running an agent from the machine itself, from the OS itself, which means that there is no difference from our standpoint between a physical machine or a virtual machine or a cloud-based machine. We would replicate all of them in the same fashion.
And then the second part of his question was, what about failback? How does the failback process work?
Excellent question. As I mentioned before, the million-dollar question. We know that this is a very big challenge for many vendors. The way that we do this is that since we have the ability to run an agent on the OS itself, right? So when we spin up the machine in the target cloud location, the agent is actually already running there. It's dormant by default, but you can activate it and use it to reverse that block level replication direction back into your on-premise machine. So should you have a disaster, right, spin things up in the cloud, once the disaster is over, you can reverse that replication direction to your on-premise machine. CloudEndure's agent will replicate the data back, and it does it quite effectively. We don't push everything back if we don't have to. If the machine went down and most of the data is still there, we only push back the deltas, and then we can recover quickly. Or if you had a true full disaster with a flood or a fire that took out the office, we will just replicate all the data back while not impacting the machines in the cloud at all, so users can continue to work. And then you can schedule at your own convenience a very quick failback window, which will be minutes, when you redirect the user traffic back to the on-premise facility.
Very nice, very nice. Very easy to do. Because recovery is the most important part. I mean, backing it up is and replicating it is one thing, but getting it up and running when there's a disaster is the key, right?
That's absolutely right.
Another question here is about are the replicated data checksummed? How do you search using metadata? They're asking. Does that make sense?
I think I understand the question. I mean, so when if it has to do with consistency, then that's the core of the technology, right? Most of our IP resides around making sure that the data is always consistent using checksums, block checksums. So that's something that we do all the time, ensuring that the blocks that are being replicated to the target location will always come up in a consistent state, which will prevent any chance of data corruption. That's really important, and that's where a vast majority of our IP resides.
Got it. Got it. Another question is, how do you validate what you have in the cloud?
I'm not sure. I think maybe it refers to the same thing that I've just answered. So when we replicate the data, we compare the block signatures and ensure that everything is consistent when we bring it up. If the question refers to something else, then I'll be happy to answer again.
Okay. Someone here is asking, how would I protect NAS data stored on a NAS? Is there an option for that?
Yeah, great question. So it depends on what type of NAS. Since we replicated the block level, our agent requires block level access to that server. If the NAS device allows the agent, if it's a Linux or Windows-based NAS, which allows the agent to be installed, then we would replicate that NAS just like any other server. No issue whatsoever. But if it's a hardened appliance, which is only exposing itself as file storage, like CIFS or NFS type storage, it would need to be replicated using a different means, not with CloudEndure.
Excellent, excellent. Someone here is asking, are there any limitations with MPIO or EMC power path?
So if the question has to do with whether we have any limitations with the underlying storage, then the answer is no, right? So when we replicate the data, we see the disks from within the OS itself. So the agent is installed on the Windows or Linux OS itself, and it sees all the disks from within the OS. And those disks can reside on any kind of storage which is transparent to us. It could be different types of SAN storage from different vendors. It could be VMDKs on VMware machines. It could be EBS volumes on Amazon machines, or persistent disks on Google machines. It's all the same to us. Or physical block devices on physical machines.
Excellent, excellent. I like that it's transparent. Someone here is asking about, of course, the pricing model. What's the pricing model look like?
Yeah, sure. So we keep it really simple on the pricing model. The pricing model with CloudEndure is based on the number of machines that you're protecting, or in other words, the number of agents that you deploy on your Windows or Linux servers that you want to protect into the cloud. And it's a flat rate model. It's just a per server, per contract term that we price the product based upon. Nothing, so there's no additional considerations regarding the amount of storage or the types of applications or the types of operating systems. We keep it really simple in a flat rate model.
I like that, simple pricing. And then what about, what's the easiest way to get started? I mean, how do people, test? Can you just replicate one VM and how does that look? Is there a kind of evaluation period?
Yeah, absolutely. So if you go to our website, www.cloudendure.com, you'll see a free trial button there, which basically starts the process. We would ask you questions about the environment so that we can ensure that we can support it. We can support Windows and Linux servers. If you have legacy mainframes, those we would not be able to support. So we would ask you those questions just to make sure that we can get started quickly, and then we provide a 14-day free trial.
Very nice. Sounds easy. I know we've got a ton of great questions here, but we're starting to run out of time. I know people want to, of course, see who won the gift card, and maybe download the trial, and then they might have some work that they need to get back to. So since we're reaching the top of the hour, let's go ahead and, if you don't mind, let's announce the prize winner, and then maybe you can get back to some of these folks, after the event going. Does that sound good?
Yeah, sounds great.
Okay. Well, again, for more information about CloudEndure, there's their email address on the screen there, info@cloudendure.com. You can go to their website, check it out, download the free trial, their phone number there if you just want to talk to somebody, a real live person. That's possible too these days. So, without further delay, let's go ahead and announce the prize winner of the $300 Amazon gift card. That is Mr. Chad Stanfield. Congratulations. Chad will be reaching out to you via email to send out that gift card. And I appreciate everyone else who took time out of their day to join the event today about cloud disaster recovery. And thank you, Gonan, and thank you, CloudEndure, for sponsoring and presenting on today's event.
Thank you very much. Thanks, David. Thanks, everyone, for joining. Take care.
All right. Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.
All right.